ating lahat, samantalang inaayos pa yung kape para sa ating mga panauhin. Simulan natin ang ating tapatan sa Aristocrat. Siguro kung meron mga panauhin tayong naririto na mahilig sa musika, palagay ko yung awiting The Party's Over ni Nat King Cole is very appropriate because the party is over, tapos na yung election, and we're just waiting for the proclamation of the winners. Kaya lang, may mga tanong. Maayos ba, malinis ba, kapani-paniwala ba ang katatapos na halalan? Yun nga ba ay halalan o hangalan? Dahilan sa meron daw ilang hangal na nahalal. Pero kung nahalal man yung hangal, hangal din ng bumoto. Di ba? Ganun ang sistema nun. So, sisimulan natin ang ating talakayan sapagkat mahalagang pag-usapan, ano ang naganap? Was it really clean? Was it really the people's will that prevailed? That, in a capsule, are the issues we'd like to discuss today. So, from a media man's perspective, we have with us Dr. Danilo Arao, a professor at the UP College of Mass Communication, and he's also with Kontra Daya. So, yung kanilang movement ay hindi ko alam kung hanggang kailan yan. Dahil sa pag naproklama na, yung ba, ano ba? Wala na ba yun? O magtutuloy-tuloy ba? We also have with us Archbishop Oscar V. Cruz, former President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. At narito rin po naman si Ginoong Antonio Butch Valdez, ang Chairman ng Philippine LaRouche Society, at si Chief Inspector Jonathan de Rosario, representing the Public Information Office of the Philippine National Police. We're expecting Professor Richard Heydarian of De La Salle University. So let's start the ball rolling, the discussions, with the impressions of our guests about the previous election. Let's start with Butch. Ano ba ang nakita mo? Nakaboto ka ba? May I see your finger?
Hindi ako naka-biometrics kanya hindi tayo nakaboto. But nevertheless, I might have had difficulty because there was no section there that says none of the above. No? Kasi I would have voted for none of the above. No? But that was our personal view. But with regard to the election, Melo, I was probably among the many, if not all of our countrymen with the not mixed emotions but happy emotions, in the sense that what we were anticipating na gulo did not really come, because at the height of the tension that was being created by what I would think by Malacanang, and with regard to the coming elections, calling for warning the people that a certain candidate should not be allowed to come in. So he was asking another candidate to resign in favor of another, and so on and so forth. Medyo na siyempre nababahala yung mga ang public. At kung sasabihin sa diin ng kanyang kagustuhan na hindi lumusot itong kandidatong to, natatakot din ng publiko na baka gamitin niya ang poder niya sa pandaya, no? Dahil matindi ang kanyang panawagan, no? Because he had the power. At kung ginawa yon, baka nga magkagulo dahil pipilitin nga yung hindi makalusot yung ayaw niyang kandidato. Mm-hmm. Now, pero obviously, pagdating ng Monday, mukhang masyadong overwhelming yung suporta ng tao dito sa nanalo at hindi
nananalo.
Nananalo, President-elect, no? At hindi siguro nakayanan kung ano man ang plano nilang gawin. And in this case, pinabayaan na lang tumuloy. At siyempre, masaya din ang tao na walang gulo. Masaya din siguro ang kapulisan na walang gulo.
Okay.
That one, I think we should be happy about. If ever there was it might have been God's intervention.
Okay, thank you. Archbishop Cruz, kayo po ang unang bumoto sa inyong presinto sa Intramuros. Ano po ang tingin ninyo nung kayo magtungo sa polling place? Wala kayong video coverage, wala kayong media coverage tulad ng ibang mga Pilipino?
Anong pinili ko? Secret.
Hindi, pero anong impressions ninyo? Was it in order? Ano po ba?
Yung presintong pinuntahan ko, yes. Siguro nga pagkat yung makina ay malamig pa at tumaandar pa. At siguro yung mga taong namamahala doon ay talagang alam ang kanilang gagawin. So I was impressed, honest, I was impressed. So I went there, my name was there, I was made to sign, etc. etc. Pagkatapos kong bumoto, lalagyan nga ako sa kamay ng tinta. Sabi ko, pwede bang huwag na lang? Sabi, hindi po pwede eh. Mabuti naman, may dala akong panlinis kagad.
So nalinis ka agad?
Nawala po ang ebidensya na bumoto ako.
Para naman kinakahiya nyo yung pagboto nyo.
Hindi naman.
Hindi naman. Okay. Danny, what are your impressions of the last?
Okay. Well, just like Archbishop, as early as 6 a.m., I was there at the precinct in Marikina City because we are residents of Marikina Heights. We noticed that the indelible ink is not so indelible because it easily washed off as experienced by Archbishop Cruz. But I'm here mainly as convener of Contradaya, of which Father Joe Dizon was the founder in 2007. And from what we can report as early as now, many of the complaints had to do with the transmission failures and the malfunctions of the vote counting machines. While it may not be true in most areas in the National Capital Region, like Intramuros or perhaps in the area that Mr. Valdez belonged to, we can say that there were cases of overheating, rejection of the ballots, the non-printing of receipts. These are recurring problems of the automated election system, which was quite reminiscent of what we experienced in 2010 and in 2013. Of course, there are also old-style cheatings like vote buying, of course, in the days prior to the May 9 elections. And if you would look at the website of the COMELEC and you do a quick search of the election returns in Lamitan, Basilan, you would see there various cases of precincts with high voter turnout ranging from 99% to 100%. Okay, on one hand, we should be happy about it, but you would notice that many of the votes are in favor of the candidates with the Daang Matwid nicknames. Let me cite an example. 595 votes, exactly 595 votes went to Mar Rojas. 595 votes went to Lenny Robredo. 2 votes went to Duterte. All the rest of the presidential and vice presidential candidates got 0 votes. I'm not kidding, 0 votes. So as Melo and I were talking a while ago, it is quite a statistical impossibility that these things would happen. We don't attribute it to the vote counting machines, far from it. It's just that these are old methods of coercion of the political warlords to ensure that they would be able to deliver the votes to their patrons. So what we are seeing is actually a situation where you have the high-tech style of cheating in the sense that we are doubting the credibility of the elections just because there is lack of transparency between the COMELEC and Smartmatic even prior to the elections. The Supreme Court even had to tell the COMELEC in not so many words that they should follow the law in terms of printing the receipt. So the genuine source code review, it leaves much to be desired. In Japan, for example, it took 10 years to review the source code when Japan initiated the first automated election system. Gaano po ba katagal ang source code review dito? 3 months. And when you go to Salle for the source code review, fina-flash lang po yung screen doon at walang oras talaga yung mga programmer para tignan kung paano gumagana yung source code na ito. So there are many other items to report, but I would rather give time to our other panelists to explain other points on this issue. But the long and short of it is that as far as Contra Daya is concerned, the election system has been severely undermined because of, number one, the lack of transparency between COMELEC and Smartmatic. Number two, as far as our assessment is concerned, there are still instances of vote buying, harassment, intimidation, and I'm sorry to say there is also instances of police and military presence in certain precincts that we've gathered. So these are instances that should be taken into account when we assess the elections. Thank you.
Very exciting yung sinabi mo, but babalikan natin yan. Okay, mula po sa Philippine National Police, please tell us, was it really peaceful? Pero meron pa rin mga napatay on election day sa Cavite. Meron ba kayong ginawa to prevent them from killing each other?
As far as the PNP is concerned naman po, sir, una po gusto ko po batiin tayo lahat na magandang umaga po. Sa amin naman po sa PNP, so far naman po, generally peaceful naman po ang aming assessment nitong nakaraang election. But we are also saying na hindi pa po tapos yung election period natin. So patuloy pa rin po magbabantay ang PNP. Kasama po natin yung Armed Forces of the Philippines, of course under the supervision of the COMELEC. But kung titingnan po natin, yun nga po, we have identified 9 provinces as election watch list of areas. But if we look at it, hindi ko lang po dala yung record ngayon, meron po dito sa mga 9 provinces na ito na wala pong insidente. So it means to show na maganda po yung ating nagawang effort on the part of the PNP. Of course, there are some incidents. But if we look at it as a whole, wala naman pong insidente na talagang nakapagpigil sa election kasi meron po tayong mga ilang lugar na hindi po natuloy ang election. But if we look at it, most of the reasons kaya po hindi natuloy ang elections are issues at of the COMELEC, not necessarily security concerns. So far as we are concerned, okay naman po, maganda naman po. Meron po tayong mga insidente, totoo po yun, meron po talaga mga insidente. But sa ngayon po, ito po ay pinag-aaralan po namin kasi not all incidents are election-related. Ang iba po dito ay hindi naman po tungkol sa election. Minsan, away po, although ang involved po ay politiko, kapatid, kamag-anak ng politiko, mga tauhan ng politiko, ngunit minsan po nakikita po natin na pag inimbestigahan siya, hindi naman po talaga yung politika ang reason for the incident. So sa ngayon po, yung mga insidente po na aming naitala, pinag-aaralan po namin at kina-qualify po namin kung talaga po pa silang election-related. For now po, ang count po namin sa election-related incidents as around 30. So yun po yung nababalidate namin na election-related. And hindi naman po lahat ito violente na insidente. Meron po dito yung may isang yung snatching ng ballot. Meron naman yung isa na allegedly kinidnap but hindi naman po pala. So may mga ganong insidente po na tinitingnan natin, not necessarily violent incidents sila, pero we count it initially as election related.
Okay. Yung number of gun ban violators, have you noticed any significant increase? What about the existence of private armed groups? Have you noticed any increase in the number of these groups allegedly, run by politicians and businessmen supporting politicians?
As far as dito po sa gun ban, implementation of gun ban is concerned, we are happy to report to the public, sa ating po mga kababayan, na ang nakumpiska po natin na baril is around 3,500. Ang bala po na nakuha natin is around 37,000. And we have explosives around 500. So ito po yung dami nitong mga armas na ito, at siguro ang arrested po natin is around ganon, mga 3,000 din po. So kung ito pong mga taong na-aresto natin, ito pong mga baril na nakuha natin sa kanila, mga bala, is enough to arm around 4 battalions of army. So napakalaking bagay po ito na nakuha po natin ito during the election. At yun nga, katulad nga ng sinabi nyo sir na sa mga partisan armed groups natin, sa tingin ko po yung effort po ng PNP at katulong ng AFP, hindi po sila nakagalaw masyado this election at hindi po significant kung ano man yung nagawa nila na action ngayong election na ito.
Pero mukhang walang reports tungkol sa vote buying na nakarating sa pulis. Ano po? Was it silently done or have they perfected the, the mechanism?
Ang medyo kasi ganito po kasi ang vote buying eh. Una, ang vote buying po, of course, it would not be done in public. Number one. Kasi ayaw rin nung magbibili ng boto na mahuli siya. Pangalawa, yung bibilan ng boto, yung tao na nabibila natin ng boto, of course, hindi rin yan magsasabi na sila ay binila ng boto because they will be criminally liable. So, yun nga, unless na siguro nahuli natin sa akto na may pera at may transaksyon na involved, mahihirapan tayo mag-ano ng insidente ng vote buying. But still, the PNP is looking at this aspect of the election, and kung ano man po yung may mga reports, meron rin po tayo mga intelligence operatives natin na nag-verify na kung totoo nga ito. In fact, merong area sa Metro Manila, hindi ko na po babanggitin, na may mga reports.
Pwede nyo nang banggitin siguro para mas maganda.
There were reports of vote buying, and then we look at it. Yun nga, ipinag-aaralan namin yung mga insidenteng ganito kung totoo nga at inimbestigahan po namin.
Okay. Danny, have you noticed whether politicians use technology and the banking system to buy votes? Because I've received reports na ang ginagawa
ATM.
tatanungin yung botante, what's your ATM number? And then, sige, papadala na kita. Tapos, yung iba naman, smart padala. Paraan.
Yung pasa-load na tinatawag.
Pasa-load, pero cash din yun eh. Kukunin mo. Dani, napunan nyo?
From our monitoring, may pagka-old school pa or Jurassic, for lack of a better term, yung paraan ng pagbibigay ng pera. Usually cash yung nakuha namin. And, since it's public information, I might as well disclose it now. All of the reports that Contra Daya gathered, strangely enough, had to do with the Liberal Party. Particularly the two standard bearers, Mar and Lenny. So the price range that we've gathered would range from 500 pesos to 3,000 pesos. I'm not sure if you have received reports higher than 3,000, but that's the ceiling that we got. So that's 3,000 per person. Now, from the monitoring that we've also gathered, especially in Mindanao, doon naman iba yung laro. Hindi po individual ang bayad, kundi buong pamilya. So, it works both ways. Sometimes it's the family itself which would openly advertise publicly, but would discreetly tell the operators that in one household there are 5 voters, how much would you be willing to pay? So parang bidding yon. So depende kung kung paano nila it would all depend on how the political operators would be able to handle that. Now, as far as social media is concerned, I hope you don't mind if we briefly...
Please.
Okay. Now, sa social media naman, yung laro naman po roon, the political operators would hire an army of trolls to, malign the candidate. Or sometimes it would be what we call in journalism as self-inflicted black propaganda. Yung tipong sinusuportan mo yung kandidato pero gagawa ng black propaganda para sa kandidatong to para makakuha ng simpatya. Because black propaganda could work both ways, right? You could either be discouraged from voting for a candidate or you would get sympathy votes.
And that's not sounding discriminatory because you mentioned the term black.
Yes, that's correct. So dito naman, the information that we gathered is ang bayaran, it could reach as much as 10,000 pesos per month. Okay, for a person. Well, at least for a person who knows his or her quote-unquote craft. Kasi pag troll ka, you have not just one account but even 10 or more accounts. So it's possible for you to earn that much money during an election campaign, courtesy of the political operators.
Really?
Yes.
And how many trolls have you noticed so far?
Ay nako, mahirap that part medyo mahirap bilangin po. But given the kind of trending topics that we've generated through the months, even prior to the election, I would suspect there are several. It's hard to quantify it. Pero siguro ang malinaw lang dito, the trolls have been in place even prior to the elections. So that's why sometimes you would begin to suspect certain presidential candidates having presidential ambitions, even years before the elections. Kasi yung parang well-entrenched na yung social media presence nila.
Okay. Archbishop, are you not surprised with these developments? Bishops are normally described as prophets.
Meron sana akong tatlong maikling bagay na gustong sabihin.
Englishin po kaya natin.
There are three small things I would like to notice. But I'd like first to comment on the matter of vote buying. Ito po nasabi ko na hindi minsan lang. Democracy and poverty cannot coexist. When one is poor and miserable, he is not free. Come on. Come on. Okay? Yun lang po ang gusto kong sabihin. Itong tatlong bagay na aking naisidugtong sana. Una, mukhang sa national level, bagaman may problema, ang problemang talagang malaki sa local level. Dito talagang patayan, dito lahat, no? Lahat ng gusto nyo gulo ay nasa local level. Sa national level, may gulo din, pero hindi masyado. Yan ang una. Ikalawa, hindi ko po maintindihan kung bakit merong quick count ek pagkatapos unofficial pala. What for? Why do the counting? It is unofficial. So, shut up and let us wait for the official count. Tapos ang kwento. At ikatlo, ito pong tungkol sa intervention ng Smartmatic na ito. Mulat sa mula itong Smartmatic, problema natin eh. Mulat sa mula. At ngayon, ito nga nagka-problema at ako po ay humahangang kay Commissioner Rowena Guanzon na talagang ali na galit. Bakit itong Smartmatic na ito'y makikialam kahit na nga ba enyi lamang magiging question mark daw. Bakit ka makikialam? Wala kang pinagsasabihan kahit sino. At ang unang pang pinuntahan ay yung quick count unofficial. So, ito lang po tatlong bagay na ito ang gusto kong sabihin sana sa pagkakataon na ito.
Okay, but I have to ask you on what you said, that poverty and democracy cannot coexist. Is it also possible that most of these politicians we elected into office want to keep us poor so that come election time, it will be easier for them to buy our votes?
Marahil po naman, I will not go that far, no? I'll just say that really, the past administration was a big failure, especially as far as socioeconomic development is concerned.
But we have a good rating from Fitch, from Moody's, Standards and Poor. We're investment grade. Isn't that enough?
Sabi nga
Archbishop?
nung araw, tell that to the Marines. Ngayon yata hindi na valid yun.
And not even the Marines would believe you, probably. Okay. Thank you. Butch, what do you have to say about this culture of vote buying?
Well, I associate with the remarks made by the Archbishop that democracy and poverty cannot coexist. And it is true that the reason people sell their votes is because the 500 or 1,000 pesos mean a lot to them. Even if you say, do not sell your votes because this guy is going to be there for 3 years or 6 years. That day's food, or that couple of days food, is very important. Another thing, ever since before, elections has always been almost like a policy, wherein economists actually are happy that vote buying is going on. because this is one of their instances where trickle-down effect, no, starts to make it becomes beneficial to the country. When money starts pouring in from the politicians, as they bring in their money from wherever they have stashed it, and the government also uses its money to share it with the people to buy votes. What happens is there is a increase in the purchases of the appliances or something like that that increases the business of the other business establishments. No? So very for those couple of months that this thing is going on, it starts to pick up in as far as our GDP is concerned. Malaki talagang pumapasok dito. This is the first, I think, and the only trickle-down effect that happens every 3 to 6 years. No?
So yung trickle-down effect, which Christian Lagarde of IMF said doesn't exist, happens in the Philippines every election time. Okay, that's very good, no? Very nice. Danny.
Yeah, if I may just add, what's a bit different in this election year is that 90% of the 2016 budget has been released as early as January 2016. So that's why eyebrows were raised as early as January as regards how the money will be spent. But if you notice, there are cases, concrete cases, where government resources have been used during the campaign to bolster the candidacies of you-know-who and for what reason. So that's one. Second, as far as Smartmatic is concerned, we agree with the points of Archbishop Cruz that they really have to go. Just to give you an idea, this year, we paid Smartmatic 8.7 billion. I repeat, 8.7 billion pesos for the VCMs, for the transmission services, as well as the hotlines, okay, for technical support. 2010, we paid around 7.2 billion pesos to Smartmatic. Okay, just to complete the picture, in 2013, we paid something like 2.8 billion. So if you total our expenses for the past 3 elections, we paid Smartmatic a total of 18.7 billion. And that's the reason, and I think that's the context, why people are very much angry with the change in the script, with the character encoding error that happened, which allegedly led to the change in the hash code. Because if you would spend 8.7 billion for this year, how can a character encoding error, the change from question mark to enye, which is quite amateurish to tell you the truth, happen? We spent that much money. And I think it is just right. It is understandable for Commissioner Guanzon to be very angry. And I think part of the demand is not to renew the contract with Smartmatic anymore, but to review the contract and withhold payment, okay, to Smartmatic until a thorough investigation would really happen. Because the fundamental reason here is we should not depend on foreign technology. Okay, we should not depend on a foreign company to run our election because it's not as if our IT professionals locally are wanting in terms of knowledge. Tayo ang nagpapadala ng mahuhusay na mga inhinyero sa labas ng bansa, di po ba? So I think we have the capacity to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'd like to acknowledge, we have with us Professor Richard Heydarian of De La Salle University. He's joining us this morning. Mabuti naman at traffic was light. Welcome and join us. I have to ask you this question as soon as you settle down. What are your impressions of the previous election?
Okay,
How was it?
Sure. Sorry, I was late. I just had head start with Karen Davila on Duterte and his foreign policy. That's my forte talaga. Well, ang unang-unang masasabi ko dyan ay I think dapat proud tayo bilang mga Pilipino because if you were watching the meeting de Avance, you would be very nervous about what could happen in this election. I won't deny it, no? We were expecting, God forbid, there could be massive irregularity or violence, especially if one candidate loses, which service says that candidate should have won. But, things turned out very well. On Monday morning, President Aquino came out with a statement, very cordial, saying that let's accept the democratic process kung sino man mananalo, which was different from his rhetoric on Saturday, calling for unity against an impending dictator. So you could see the, cooling down. And of course, I was commenting on the elections until 11 p.m. with one of the major channels. I think by 10 p.m., I was calling it already that we know who's going to be our next president. May mga nagalit sa akin na kampo, why was I calling it earlier? But by 11:30, Grace Poe came out with a concession speech. The next day, kung titignan mo yung concession speech ni Mar Rojas, very conciliatory. I wish you success. And then if you look at it, 120 VCMs out of 92,000 nagkaroon ng problema. That's 99.7% success rate. Not bad. 50 election-related violence since January and 10 on the election day itself. Of course, every single life matters a lot. Though if you compare it to previous presidential elections, I think it was relatively more peaceful. So I think we pulled off, quite surprisingly, perhaps the most credible, transparent elections, presidential elections in recent memory. By Filipino standards, of course. I mean, it could have been much better. The VP race, I'm still nervous about that.
Yes, that's my
But
next
overall,
question.
I think that's the only wrinkle, the VP race. But I think overall, it was way better than we thought. And that's why the following day, the Philippine Stock Exchange hit a 9-month high. And I think that was not because of Duterte himself, but that was because there was an appreciation of the smooth process of
Or
democratic
was it because the
transition.
Aquino administration is going out in a couple of weeks?
Well, the stock exchange quite doubled in the last 6 years. So let's be fair to our good friend, outgoing guy. I mean, he wasn't such a bad president, was he? And in fairness to him, I think he has to get the credit for overseeing a relatively credible elections. But I hope the VP race will be settled soon. I'm quite nervous about that. Of course, I'm not going to say who's my preference, but I mean, I'm Ilocano, but not necessarily the Ilocano candidate. But that's the farthest I'm going to say. No, so I hope for the best. I hope we settle it in the most credible way possible. But if you look at it, all major candidates seem to accept the outcome. So I hope whoever will be the loser here will be sportsman-like or sportswoman-like
Really?
about it.
Well, this is kind of exciting. Whenever we talk of politics in the Philippines, there seems to be a lot of bravado. But anyway, I have a question here. What are the implications, Richard, as far as security is concerned? Should this race for the vice presidential candidate gets too hot?
Well, shoot. I just, as I said, kaya nga sana maging sportsman-like or woman-like kung sino man na. I mean, hindi ako natutuwa kasi kagabi narinig ko na, like, each of them are claiming victory. Si Marcos sabi na panalo na ako. Yung isa naman sa church sa Ateneo, sabi niya panalo na tayo. Mathematically impossible na humabol. Medyo hindi ko yata gusto nangyari. Although, in fairness, I understand where the supporters of the losing side are coming from. Kasi mukhang nagkaroon ng reset. Yung sa unofficial tally, it went to 96 and then went down to 93. I mean, this to be honest, let me put it this way. I don't know why we're still dealing with the Smartmatic. Marami akong kaibigan sa Europe and other countries, they said we rejected their bid. So if there are better options, why are we sticking with them? They're not the worst one, but I think perhaps for the next elections, we have to consider a more credible partner. Hindi yung nakiki-in ng algorithm at the last minute when you have a 95% count. So I think it doesn't help. But at the same time, I'm not buying this argument that, there's massive irregularity, this pattern analysis. I'm not buying it. I'm talking to a lot of IT experts and they're saying maybe this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Some of these guys are criticizing the process. So, walang problema sa presidential, walang problema sa senatorial, walang problema mukhang sa all levels. I hope we don't say that the whole election was not credible just because one candidate doesn't want to concede.
Okay, now let me ask you, because you came in late. Filipinos despise people accused of graft. Okay? While certain candidates for the Senate have not been found guilty of anything yet, one of them was accused of being involved or dipping his finger into the PDAF, and I'm referring to Joel Villanueva. And he's now number 2. How can we explain that? Was he really that popular? Was it really that effective? Yung advertisements? How do you look at it?
Very quickly now. Well, I think yun ang pinakamalaking surprise elections. Nag-number 1 at some point si Joel Villanueva. So mga 7 p.m. sabi namin, dapat i-screenshot ni Joel yan, in fairness. Kasi hindi namin ma-expect he will hold it. In fairness, until the next day, almost number 1 siya. So nag-number 2 siya. He was sibak, right? So that was supposed to be
Yes.
anti-corruption. No, I think ang
Anti-corruption.
nagpanalo talaga sa kanya is yung Testaman. Parang dating Superman, Batman, with all of these movies, Civil War, I think bentang-benta, yung zeitgeist. So I think pasok siya. And the issue of job, vocation, napaka-klaro, simple to the point. Trabaho. Tapos,
Yeah, and
tapos ang usapan.
some people say he used test the funds to advertise.
I don't know. Well, the other thing is that LP siya dapat, di ba? Pero hindi siya he never talks about yung daan matuwid, no? Parati pinag-usapan niya yung sarili niya, yung testa. To be honest, I think yung daan matuwid was not a good electoral strategy. I think kung si Lenny most likely won, right? So I think the reason Lenny won is because pinag-usapan niya yung Robredo brand, yung Naga model, hindi yung daan matuwid, no? And even with Joel Villanueva, I think he more talk about yung sarili niya, yung testament, more than yung daan matuwid and LP and all. Maybe that was just good enough for him to land it. And fresh face siya. He's young, he's fresh face.
And that was,
I think gusto ng tao na iba rin yung mga composition. If you look at the composition of our Senate, may mga Sergio Osmeña, hindi nakapasok, right?
That is the question.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Getting Gingona out of the
Exactly,
Senate for
Gingona,
asking
Sergio.
good questions.
Yeah.
No?
Diliman, I was thinking she will be higher, pero just on the threshold siya on the 12th. Recto was just 11th, right?
Yeah, and this guy claiming success in rice production.
Yeah.
Who he? Kiko Pangilinan. Yeah, you know.
I don't know, it's the Sharon effect, maybe.
Okay. How did the media handle the elections, Professor Danny Arao?
Okay. Before that, just a quick rejoinder to what the professor said. It may also have to do with the fact that the Liberal Party had that liberal use of government resources, because if you look at the 12 senatorial candidates who are leading right now, about 7 out of 5 are from the Liberal Party. Okay? So, 7 out of 12. Okay? Only 5 are either independents or affiliated with the opposition. So, I would say that Villanueva also benefited from being part of the ruling party's machinery. Now, as regards media coverage, of course, the media, the dominant media in particular, should be commended for giving real-time information. And I think the complementation of both social media and the traditional media, particularly television, have helped a lot in terms of disseminating information. Now, the quick count has its use in terms of ensuring transparency in the election and, to be a bit, pardon the term, anticlimactic when it comes to the proclamation of the winners, particularly the presidential and the vice presidential races. Because if we delay the results until, let's say, May 24 or May 25 when Congress convenes, people might think that there is some hanky-panky. And besides, it's supposed to be an automated election, so the release of the information should be in real time. But as we discussed a while ago, there are problems with the transmission. So that's why it's a bit ironic that there should be a quick release of information, but even up to now, especially in areas in the Visayas and Mindanao, we still have precincts that haven't transmitted yet for one reason or the other. And there are cases where SD cards are said to be found in garbage dumps. So there are instances of that, and media, again, as far as coverage is concerned, should be commended for providing that information. Now, as regards deepening the discourse, I think this is where some of us may fall short. For example, the proper explanation of Smartmatic's role in the 2010 and the 2013 election should have been better contextualized during the election campaign. And as far as embedded reporting is concerned, I think we know in our code of ethics that we cannot have that Stockholm syndrome attitude with candidates, because even if we are embedded in the campaign, we still need to be objective in the reportage. We still need to look at both the positive and the not so positive side of things. Instead of romanticizing the candidate and the platform that he or she stands for, if we do that, we end up, sending not news releases but praise releases, which is unacceptable in journalism. And
In the first place, Professor,
yes.
I have to ask you, should the networks fund their own people covering the candidates? I've seen Facebook photos, reporters taking the Learjets of the candidates themselves.
Yes, that's a good question. Honestly, if the dominant media can afford it, then they should. But if you cannot, then you have to make the proper disclosure that your travel has been funded by this or that politician. Disclosure is most important. But of course, the most ideal to ensure your independence in media is to just fund it on your own. So that's one. Second, of course, this is a not so openly talked about case in journalism, but it has been published in the book News for Sale by Chay Florentino Hofileña as early as 2013. Sometimes media institutions should be able to properly disclose how much money they've earned from the election campaign, whether in the form of advertising or whatever, because the nature of the contracts of the news media organizations sometimes should be questioned. Okay, I'm not referring to a particular network here, but more or less you might get an idea. There is one network that would have a package deal with a candidate wherein you can advertise, but at the same time you'll get airtime for a news or public affairs program. That should not be for sale. Okay, that part about the news and public affairs program, because it should be born out of editorial independence. So marketing should be different from
Excuse
news
me,
coverage.
Professor, you're
Yes.
talking of the ideal because if
Yes.
you check on the ownership of most media entities, they are businessmen
Yes.
who cannot afford to antagonize any of the presidential candidates.
Yes, that's correct. Many of the dominant media organizations are businesses, but of course there should be independence from marketing and editorial and news and current
programming.
affairs. And programming, yes, and programming. Now that's the ideal setting, but of course as academicians we don't set high standards just for the sake of setting them, because as the sayings goes, whether you're from LaSalle or from UP, standards are meant to be high. Because if you lower the standards, they're not standards anymore, but just simply pragmatic existence that would be devoid of any moral responsibility. So that's the thing about ethics. It's meant to be high. So that's why, while the candidates deserve a lot of self-criticism, the media institution should also try to regroup and, have some form of self-reflection also.
Okay. Thank you. Archbishop Cruz. You also come from the academe because you're with San Beda, right? Excuse me. I should not have mentioned that. But no. I just want to find out your views about how the media cover the elections. Please.
Frankly, I think money has more weight than ethics. Sorry. I hope I'm wrong. But when money comes in, I think ethics goes out. That is not very profound. But going back a little to what Professor said here, the way I see it, the endorsed candidate lost because of the endorser.
How's that? So it's not the PR, but the endorser.
Yes.
Why did you say that, Archbishop? With all due respect.
No need for respect there. I'm just saying that I think I can say this openly because I do not know really if it happened.
Atin-atin lang naman to, Archbishop.
During the campaign, I had a friend who is rather close to the vice presidential candidate of the party in power. And I told this man, please tell the candidate not to use, never to use anymore the daang matwid ek-ek. Because I said that is a death warrant. And whether it reached him or not, I don't know. But I noticed that the phrase was not used anymore. What I'm trying to say is, okay, the administration's bet of the vice president is still on. Still on. But you could see the fight is quite close, huh?
The fight's close.
So, I'm sorry to say that the incompetence
Of?
of the outgoing national leadership is the basic cause of the success of the counter political party. Meaning to say, how could it be so far, the distance of votes in the presidential election? That in the vice presidential, it is quite close, but in the presidential, oh my God,
We're talking of millions.
yes.
Okay.
So, I hope I'm wrong, but please forgive me. Mr. President, you are the cause of why your own candidate lost.
Okay. We'll open the floor to our friends from the media who may have questions. We'd like to acknowledge, we have Channel 7 with us. And we also have Phoenix TV and Channel 13. Yes, start, please. Please use the microphone. All right. Please introduce yourself again.
Good morning po. I'm Victoria Tulad of GMA7. Gusto ko lang pong balikan yung about Smartmatic. Sir Arao, Sir Heydarian, and Archbishop Cruz said na why are we still dealing with Smartmatic? Will you call on COMELEC to reconsider for the coming elections na mag-iba na tayo ng partner?
Okay. Well, I'm not the expert, but well, anyway, as far as Contradaya is concerned, actually our call is to reject Smartmatic altogether because we have to depend on, local indigenous knowledge. If the VCM cannot last the tropical climate, it has to do with Smartmatic using its foreign technology and hope, okay, fingers crossed that it would work well here. The case in Brazil should be an experience, should be a wake-up call for us all together because the Brazilian government was so angry at Smartmatic that it is threatening to sue that company for the bungled elections, for the mishandling of the elections there. So we don't want that thing to happen in the Philippines. We've had a bad experience already in 2010, 2013, and even 2016. And we can only hope that this is a wake-up call. So we welcome the pronouncement of Commissioner Guanzon that they be investigated. And actually, we want to take it one step further. We want the withholding of the payment. We assume that they haven't been fully paid yet. So until an investigation happens. And if there is really incompetence, negligence, as we suspect, then we shouldn't pay them at all. And we should ask for a reimbursement. It's 8.7 billion, we repeat, 8.7 billion of wasted money.
Okay.
Archbishop.
I just wanted to bring up to the group here that we must remember that the entry of Smartmatic was controversial. There was a bidding that went through and Smartmatic was taken out. But for some reason or another, especially because of a visit of the chairman of Smartmatic, his name is Mark Malloch Brown, to Malacanang, somehow, almost overnight, there was a change in the position of COMELEC. And this was controversial. Many people were arguing why such a change was made. And this
When
was
was
not,
this?
This was maybe about January
This year.
this year. When this happened,
So it was not the visit of the former Miss Universe
no.
some
No,
years
this
ago?
was Mark Malloch Brown, the chairman, who, after Smartmatic was taken out in the bidding, re-entered after a visit to Malacanang. Now, I just wanted to point this out because this has to be taken into context. I think I am one of those people that rather suspicious about these developments. And that Smartmatic, these are not just technical or mechanical issues that we're talking about. And true enough, something had happened as discovered by the hashtag intervention by a Smartmatic fellow. Okay. I do not want also to exonerate COMELEC in this particular in this particular issue. Because COMELEC is directly responsible for Smartmatic's actions. And despite the fact that many lawyers have already said before that the entry of Smartmatic here, being not just a foreign company, but a separate company that is holding national elections, no, is already infirmed as far as our constitutional laws are concerned. No? But nevertheless, having allowed this, let us allow it. But COMELEC is not without fault. Even if they can claim ignorance as to what had happened, no, they are still, as far as many are concerned, jointly and severally responsible and liable, no, for this whole issue. I am one of those, our organization is one of those that are in agreement for a complete audit of the whole process that had happened, even if it may affect, I don't know if it will affect the situation of the presidential elect's phenomenal victory, but at least the whole process has to be reviewed without the intervention of certain other people. It must be an independent audit of key experts that can be collectively working together to go through the whole process of how these votes were garnered by the different candidates and where they come from.
I see. Richard, before the Archbishop. Archbishop, kayo po. About Smartmatic. Bakit alisin na natin to?
You know, I'm old. I have been through a lot of election here, election there, there. And the moment Smartmatic came in, that was 2010. Questions here and there have arisen. Doubts here, doubts there have taken place. And perhaps I may tell a story very shortly of what happened to me personally.
Okay.
There was this lady and gentleman who came to me one afternoon, and they were very angry. They were complaining because they were not paid. Paid for what? Because they were part of big machines somewhere. I will not mention the exact place.
But it's in Ortigas, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They were. So you know these things. Okay, very good. So I keep quiet. You know it all.
No. But for the record, for our friends.
Pero they came not because of the questionable machinations of Smartmatic counting, etc., but they were very angry because that morning when they went to report for work, there was not a single machine in the 2 floors of the building. They were gone. In one night, they were able to clean the place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, going back to what I was saying, itong Smartmatic ito, mula problema na eh.
Mm-hmm.
Pwede ba baka sakali naman, English ba? English?
Yes.
Baka naman next time around, is it possible that we could have something else? And if a local techie people, can
do it.
Can do it. Why do we need to import anything and import anybody
Okay.
just for our national elections? Come on.
Okay. Well said, Archbishop. Professor Heydarian.
I'll be very quick. I don't pretend to be an IT expert, although when I was younger, I used to play a lot of games.
You could have been president
That was
too.
before.
Yeah.
Now, my point is, of course, I still welcome automated elections rather than the manual. And my praise for the election was in relative terms compared to what we had in the past. But if you look at the global standards, I think really Smartmatic falls short. And as I said, ang pangit ng reputation sa, not only in Europe, even in Latin America, they're Venezuelan, right? Even their own backyard, they're not that appreciated. So for me, meron na nga yung shroud of doubt doon sa integridad ng election. You already have that concern. So for me, at the very least, you have to make sure that yung partner mo ay there's no shred of suspicion or doubt as much as possible. So even though we can technically argue that that algorithmic intervention at the last minute did not alter, but the political message is very clear. People from inside can actually reconfigure the system, and if the Smartmatic has a bad reputation here and abroad, that's not a recipe for good public relations. And I think that's the last thing we need in such a contentious race, especially when your vice presidential race is that close. So we were lucky the presidential race was a clear win. But imagine what if the presidential race was also as close as the vice presidential race, we would have a completely different conclusion. I would be way more pessimistic. So lucky tayo, medyo clear win. And nagpapasalamat ako, at least we have surveys that don't seem to be so far. And the other thing is that sana meron din tayong more exit polls, like multiple exit polls, and then triangulate natin. So we don't only rely on official tally, on unofficial tally, PPRs, CV, but we also have exit polls by SWS and Pulse Asia para marami tayong basihan to triangulate whether yung resulta ay credible or hindi. And sana, no more na this Smartmatic and all. I mean, we're paying a lot anyway, why not get a better partner? If locally meron tayong mas maganda, why not?
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Follow up, please.
Just a follow-up po. Despite yung tweak sa hash code, bakit credible pa rin? Or bakit parang, sabi nyo, massive cheating is still not, believable dito sa nangyayari? Thank you.
To everyone.
I'm not the IT
except
expert.
the police, no? Yeah, please.
It is not yet a fact that there was no massive cheating, not yet established, unless precisely an audit is made. No? Because you cannot just accept COMELEC's sweeping statement that this was just a minor glitch. No? It has to be investigated by people that are apart from the so-called experts of COMELEC and Smartmatic. No? I mentioned earlier that Mark Malloch Brown, the name Mark Malloch Brown, the reason for that is, I can say this, I think, and I don't. Mark Malloch Brown is identified with many what we call color revolutions in the past 25, 30 years. No? Regime changes. No? And he has been involved in this. And the reason I mention this is because it should ring a bell, at least with people that are involved in intelligence, no? That there is a connection and there is a reason why these things are happening.
So you see something sinister in it.
Definitely.
How
Definitely.
sinister is it?
Well, like I said, regime changes no, are being made this way. No? Now, the computers has its limitations. In our case here, the phenomenon that we saw in as far as Duterte is concerned could not be overcome by any kind of computer manipulation. However, if it is close enough as there is doubt as to the outcome of the vice presidential election. The other thing that we should also look at, you mentioned the senatorial candidates. What you saw to be surprising might not be too surprising with those that are involved in computer tampering. Remember, the public's eye is on the president and the vice president in a national elections. We almost discarded and didn't pay attention to what was going on in the senatorial. The senatorial list has not changed from the day that they made it public during the counting. That did not change, even in the rankings. What they did towards the end was shift Villanueva down to second and Drilon to number 1 so that it will look like there was a change. So, but the rest from 1 to 12 have not changed, even in the positions. Now, this should be also a big question mark because the presidential and the vice presidential positions were changing. As you saw, let's say Mar Rojas being in third and eventually catching up, and over
Grace Poe, number
Grace Poe,
two.
number 2 became number 3, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And then the same thing with the vice president. But there has been no change, practically no change in the senatorial. This should be a big question mark.
Okay.
That's why the audit is very important.
Let me ask you this, Butch. If the people were so disgusted with the endorser which made Duterte win, how come that the senators aligned with the administration made it to the top 12?
That is Smartmatic's answer. That is what Smartmatic should answer, not us. That question precisely is being asked by everybody else. No?
Okay.
Okay, yes.
I guess, okay, just a quick rejoinder and then to answer Victoria's question a while ago
Yes.
regarding cheating. Notice that the LP, the senatorial candidates, have disassociated themselves with Aquino. When we talk about the individual campaigns of the senatorial candidates, for example, Ontiveros was benefited a lot from the LP campaign machinery, but
And PhilHealth.
and PhilHealth, of course. But as far as the Daang Matwid slogan is concerned, it was only Mar and Lenny that used them quite, liberally. So it did Mar in, but toward the end of the campaign, notice that Lenny Robredo also disassociated herself with the policies and programs of Aquino, and even went to the extent of criticizing some of them. And of course, she packaged herself well in terms of associating her name with the other candidates, opening up the possibilities for a Duterte-Robredo tandem, Po Robredo, Binay Robredo, exactly, Rodrigo, another term for Roro. Now, as far as cheating is concerned, just to get back to Ms. Tulad's question, let's try to quantify. The COMELEC itself admits, even before the start of the campaign, that the target transmission is only 90% of the 92,509 precincts. Why is it only 90%? Because the remaining 10% cannot be transmitted directly from the VCMs because of, surprise, surprise, the lack of signal. Okay? And the fact that they're located in remote areas, among other concerns. So what do we make of the 10%, which is 9,251 precincts? On the average, there are about 600 voters per polling precinct. If you do the math, we are talking about 5 million voters. Now, given that expected voter turnout of 81%, we are the number of votes that are vulnerable to fraud would be something like 4 million voters. Okay? So there is that question already right from the start. Now, should we be happy with the COMELEC's claim that there is a 94% transmission rate? Definitely not. You know why? Because in their statistics, they don't openly disclose the number of VCMs that were able to transmit directly, as well as those that had to be carried physically. We have a viral photo of a school here in Manila where the VCM had to be carried to the basketball court so that it can get a signal. Okay? In other extreme, you know what's the most extreme case here? SD cards being transported physically, okay, to the nearest location, okay, so that it can be transmitted from there, or transporting the SD card from the precinct to the municipio or to the city hall. That's where the modern day ballot switching would become possible. And we have anecdotal evidence, I'm sure you've read about it, SD cards being found in the dumpsters. So the 4 million votes are quite vulnerable to election fraud. I'm not saying that there's massive cheating altogether, but the possibility is there. And we can only make a conclusion whether or not there was massive cheating or just simply, modified or moderate cheating, maybe toward the end of the campaign. So, but as far as quantification is concerned, right from the very start, we already made the call that COMELEC and Smartmatic have undermined the credibility of the elections.
Really? Archbishop, would you care to add fuel to the fire? No more. Okay. We have a question from Phoenix TV. Miss Yan Fangsu. Yan?
Hi, I would like to address my question to Professor Heydarian. What do you think our foreign policy should be going forward? How do we balance between China and the U.S.?
Might as well include Malaysia and the other Asian countries.
The whole United Nations. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Very quickly, I'll try to answer that because this could be a whole separate meeting you could have. Well, I mean, every new president brings in certain calibrated, limited opportunity for resetting relations with friends and foes. And I think we have to accept that the current counterbalancing strategy of the Aquino administration, which is essentially side with the US, side with Japan, push back against China, is not necessarily creating the results that we're looking for. China has already secured its grip not only in the parasols, but Spratlys. There's a high possibility that it may extend its defense perimeter in the South China Sea to the Scarborough Shoal, which is 220 kilometers away from our coastline. That's around 120 nautical miles. And even if we have an arbitration case, which I, Jay, but Bakal, among others, kind of supported, we have to accept that the effectiveness of that, the impact of that is limited because it's non-enforceable. China's boycotted the whole procedure and they seem determined to ignore it. So keeping that in mind, I appreciate that Mayor Digong, yes, he has these statements like jet ski and planting flag. I call that crazy Nixon moves. You have to show toughness towards the Republic. That's important because if you have a strong anti-China sentiment, and China is bullying us, let's be very honest about that. But I think that Mayor Digong has also consistently said that unlike Aquino administration, he's open to direct dialogue with the highest levels in Beijing, which in my opinion is common sense, which seems to be lacking in the current administration.
Okay.
I mean, you keep your friends close, you keep your enemies even closer. And you cannot choose your neighbors like your friends. China is our neighbor and they'll be there for the next 1,000 years probably. So the thing is, we have to reopen communication channels, not because I am naive to think that just because you talk to China, you'll solve your problem overnight. No, because you have to talk to make sure that the problems in the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea do not escalate into all-out conflict. That is why Vietnam, that is why Japan, that is why US, all of these countries who have problems with China have maintained highest possible institutionalized bilateral dialogue, defense, foreign policy, and head of state. Well, if you look at the Philippines, what do we have? And unfortunately, all our ambassadors seem to have problems, health problems. I don't know whether there's a conspiracy here or it's the climate or something. So our communication channels are very problematic. And if Duterte is going to reopen that, I think that's a smart move. The other thing Duterte said is this: let's accept it. We cannot go to war with China, and at some point, joint development is the way forward. We had a bad experience during the Arroyo administration, but as the saying goes, do not throw out the baby with the bathwater. The bathwater was how the Arroyo administration negotiated the Joint Maritime Seismic Undertaking from 2005 to 8. If Duterte is open to negotiating a much more transparent, credible, and consultative joint development scheme with China in certain areas outside Reed Bank, I think that's a smart way to move forward. And China seems to be very appreciative of this new tone coming out of Duterte. Nonetheless, let's not be naive. Let's not think that Duterte can change everything overnight. First of all, you have a lot of constraints. First is anti-China sentiment in the Philippines. SWS says that negative 45. That's the favorability rating of China. The second thing is this. We have an alliance with US. We have a burgeoning alliance with Japan. Those countries will pull some strings. They will not allow us to just suddenly go 180 degrees and shift to the other side and bandwagon. Third thing is Duterte is known to have association with the left. The last thing he wants to do is to sever ties with US and come off as if he's completely leftist. So he has to be very careful about that, and let's be honest, the Philippine media, intelligentsia, and security establishment is very pro-American. So keeping all of these things in mind, I think there's still some space for us to recalibrate our relations with China, not because I think we can solve the problem overnight, it's because I think we can at least manage the disputes and make sure they don't get out of control. The other thing we have to keep in mind is this. Next year we'll be the chairman of ASEAN. Of course, 1 month ago, there were some senior diplomats asking me, Professor Heydarian, do you think that Digong could oversee ASEAN chairmanships and the East Asia Summit? 2 months ago, I was a little bit worried. But now I'm seeing a much more serious statement like Digong. I hope he stands by his word that he will not use cuss words among other things. So we have to also show to the rest of ASEAN that we're not here an American proxy trying to attack China, that we are an independent country trying to protect our interests and will be a responsible ASEAN member calling for dialogue and engagement rather than confrontation. The third thing is this. What I appreciate with Duterte is that he's saying we have to be open to Chinese investment. Of course, I'm not naive. I've studied this extensively. I know that China's investments tend to go with corruption, environmental concerns. But there are also many experiences that China invested in other countries and things went well. For instance, in Britain, China will build nuclear power plants. China will build high-speed railway. That's Britain. Just keep in mind that. I'm not talking about some random sub-Saharan African country. So that means China also has a good track record in certain countries. I think it is imperative for the Philippines to welcome back Chinese investments, infrastructure investments under very strict surveillance and supervision because we need Chinese investments. Without Chinese investments, without good infrastructure, hindi tayo magkakaroon ng inclusive development. You need infrastructure to deal with the agricultural sector. You need infrastructure to bring in manufacturing investment. And unless you revive agricultural sector and manufacturing investment, you will never have inclusive development. This is the position of World Bank. This is the position of every political economist with a sound mind that you can meet. And I think China could be a good partner with us. So equilateral balancing is, I think, will be the strategy of Duterte. And I think that's the right strategy to move forward. That's what FVR did. That's what Arroyo did. Arroyo did it a little bit more controversially than FVR. So my point is, throw out the bathwater, but keep the baby, which is engagement and dialogue. Because that's our only way to avoid war.
Okay. Thank you. Archbishop, would you care to add?
I just want to ask a question from the professor. How come we are so preoccupied with China and yet we are at complete rest with Malaysia such that we do not talk anymore about Sabah? Will you please elaborate on this?
Okay, this is a controversial question. Well, Malaysia has been a relatively decent friend when it comes to dealing with MILF. We know the history. They used the insurgents in Mindanao to bog us down because they were scared that Marcos will invade Sabah or something like that. This came out in WikiLeaks cable. So if you go to WikiLeaks cable, the Malaysian government of Razak the father asked the British government to ask America, to ask Kissinger, for Kissinger to ask Marcos not to invade Sabah. They were scared of us, right, 60s and 70s. And they used the insurgency to bog us down. But let's accept, in the last 6 years, when it came to negotiation with MILF, Malaysia, the Razak government, Najib Razak government has been helpful to us. Now, does that mean we should give up on our claims on Sabah? Of course not. We have legitimate historical concerns. But at the same time, let's also make sure we don't sound like China, right? Because China says, oh, we own all of this water because 100, 200 years ago we had this and that. The problem is this, in international law, what matters is effective and continuous exercise of sovereignty. Who has exercised continuous sovereignty over Sabah for the past modern times, as far as modern times is concerned? It's not the Philippine Republic. It's not the the Sulu Sultanate gave it under a lease to the British Empire back in the early 19th century. So I think it will be very hard for us to make this legal. I'm talking about legal. I'm not talking about political. Politically, we should fight for Sabah forever, of course. But legally speaking, I think it's very hard for us to pull off our claim over Sabah. That's a very difficult thing. And the other thing is this. I think if there were a referendum, people of Sabah would want to really be on their own, rather than to be Philippines and Malaysia. They don't like Malaysia because the Petronas gets all the oil of Sabah and then gives it to Kuala Lumpur, so they have Imperial Kuala Lumpur. They don't want to be with the Philippines. They look at Mindanao. Do you want to be part of the Philippines? You don't want to be part of the Philippines. I think if people in Sabah were given a choice, they would rather go independent on their own. So I think we don't have a legal recourse here, to be honest. But politically, yes, I think we have to be strong. One reason I think we have to be tough on China is our OFWs. Our OFWs, a lot of our citizens in Malaysia are badly mistreated, especially after the Sulu. They pulled off that shenanigan in Sulu. A lot of Filipinos were subjected to harassment, interrogation, and all. I think we have to be tough on the Malaysians. Do not mistreat our citizens, whether they're legally or illegally there. So my bigger concern with them is our citizens who are there now, rather than this difficult to argue historical claim there. I think any international lawyer will agree that our claim to Sabah is now tenuous. But it makes sense for us from a patriotic standpoint. Yeah.
And I was in Sabah some years ago. I talked to the Filipinos there, asked them, will you be returning to Manila with the signing of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro? And they said, we will return to the Philippines for regular visits. But for us to return, to stay for good, we're doing much better here.
I understand.
Our children go to school, they get allowances from the government.
I understand. I live here.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, let's start with the lady. Yan, do you have a follow-up? Yeah, excuse me. Yan will have a follow-up? No more? Yes, madam. Please.
Good morning. Kathy Cruz from DWAD, tuklasin natin. And of course, ang ating katipunan with Professor Butch Valdez. Anyway, the question refers to Dr. Arao, Professor Butch Valdez, and Archbishop Oscar Cruz. Political parties have their own color, actually. That's what happened. Do you think it has an effect or contribution to the winning candidates from the president down to the LGU political people? Second, is this can be compared to seemingly orchestrated news of several big media networks to condition the minds of the people? What I'm saying is, do you think communication and color is the two-way used in the recent to condition the minds of the Filipino people in the recent election?
Well, for me, color is just part of the branding. What's more important, I think, for political parties would be their ideological underpinnings, the reason of being for that particular political party. But given the personality politics that informs Philippine society, or even the election system in general, color is just simply that. It's superficial, and it helps us recall who is yellow, who is blue, who is white, and who are undefined colors, for example. But at the local level, I would venture to guess that it's more complicated than that, because there are cases where the ruling party would end up endorsing someone else at the presidential level, for example. In Bicol, that has been very pronounced, because I come from Bicol, so I know the kind of political complications, at least on the ground. So color is just simply that. Now, as far as media are concerned, I think, to be fair, media have had a conscious effort to report on the platform. But media can only do so much when there's nothing much to report. When the platform is only defined as parenthood statements, or to be more sexist about it, motherhood statements. If you just want to say free education without qualifying where will you get the funds, and when you say free education, are you referring to state universities and colleges, or including private schools like De La Salle and Ateneo? So there are cases like that where media would tend to fall short, not because it's their fault, but because there's nothing much to report. But media could be taken to task also for not, number one, for not digging deeper into it, okay, asking the follow-up questions, and number two, if by following up the questions you still fail to get the information, then you expose the candidates and the parties for who they really are. And we go back to the fundamental weakness of embedded reporting, because sometimes embedded reporting would lead you to believe that you only have to report on the positive side of the campaign trail, where you end up hero worshipping the candidates and the quote-unquote ideological convictions, no matter how limited they are. But of course, in journalism, we have to be as objective as possible, and you have to face the risk of being an embedded reporter and writing negatively about your candidate if it's necessary. So that's the reality that I think we all have to contemplate on, as regards not just the politics, but also the kind of media coverage that results from the personality politics that we have.
Archbishop, your take.
No, I would give the floor to Professor.
Well, the question was about local government and national leadership, if there is a connection, and political parties. Well, here in the Philippines, our political parties do not have a philosophy, do not have a real ideology except extreme left, for example, or extreme right. No? But in as far as the way we have been holding our agrupations and elections, they have been really just centered on who the candidate is. No? And that is how the political parties gravitate towards whoever they feel is going to continue their interests. I'm talking about the politicians. No? So the color thing, as I mentioned, color revolutions, no? And changes and regime changes has been a phenomenon that started in 1986. And Mark Malloch Brown was very much involved in the 1986 revolution. And other countries that followed, no, started using color, yellow, orange, red, in different countries. No? And up to now, this is being used to probably differentiate a group of supporters of one particular candidate with another, and sometimes it's easier to get the mob effect, no, to overwhelm another group by just seeing a mass of yellow T-shirts or whatever it is. No? So this is a technique that has been used by those that have manipulated societies in changes in regime. No? But I just wanted to reiterate that in the Philippines, we do not have philosophies that are the foundations of our political parties. We only have personalities.
No.
And it is high time that we do.
But Butch, how would you account for the party list? Don't
Well,
they carry something
The party
different?
list, sad to say, are sectoral representations. And the way it has been interpreted by leadership, I would think during Ramos's time, is that they provided representation of certain sectors, not ideas. Wherein
Neglected sectors.
well,
Marginalized.
so-called marginalized sectors. So you will have, of course, the PWDs. No? You will have now the LGBTs. No?
The youth.
And then the youth and the women, as if though these particular people are not represented by a congressman already in their district. No? This is what is sad. I would think that if you were a party list, you must have an ideology that is very strong. Hopefully, people will gravitate towards you with an objective. A party list must always have a philosophy and objective that this is the way society should be run, and eventually people will support you when you take over government. No? Not just to voice out your concerns about allowing wheelchair ramps or something like that. No? This is the responsibility of your district congressman, who is congressman for all. No?
What about party list groups like Bagong Henerasyon, you know? One Pacman, and all this. You know, I really find this strange.
Well, the same answer. No? The same thing with Buhay. No? Why do you need a party list that is advocating this, wherein the whole society is already divided in as far as the RH bill is concerned? No? You don't need Buhay. No? The whole Philippine society is already divided in as far as that's concerned. And the debate should be in Congress. No? Not just because of Buhay, no? But because it is an issue that affects the whole country. Well, the way we have done it is we've allowed party list to be sectoral, marginalized sectoral representation, which is I think a wrong interpretation of what it should be.
Now, for my sanity, tell me, when did the Liquefied Petroleum Gas Marketers Association became a sector, you know? Yeah, Danny. Yeah, okay,
We
please.
go on that, yeah. I think it's the sheer perversion of the party list system that makes me very skeptical that if we move to parliamentary system, suddenly everything is going to be fine. I hear this from even former heads of state. They say, Richard, maybe if we go parliamentary, we will overnight have a Labour Party, a Tory. I said, look at the party list system, how easily it has been infiltrated by the trapos. So I'm very sure that even if we move to parliamentary system, it's going to be again infiltrated and perverted in the same way. My observation is we're not unique in this lack of ideological rigor. I mean, even if you look at the US, for heaven's sake, I mean, look at people like Hillary Clinton. What is her ideology aside from trying to win power? So for the first time in a long time, the US finally have this extreme right and extreme left. But what are the chances of Bernie Sanders becoming the representative Democrat? So I think let's not just lambast the Philippines. This is a global problem. Since the end of Cold War, we are moving towards Francis Fukuyama called end of history, which is everyone's saying the same thing, which is making more money and giving jobs, right? So I think it's not more than that. I think what we can do is we can work with the system we have. I know, for instance, in Indonesia, which has a very similar political system to us, in all wrong ways, is that they have a rule whereby you cannot run as a president unless you belong to a political party that has 30% representation in the parliament. So that forced Joko Widodo, which was more popular than Duterte, to side with PDIP of Megawati, so that forced him to be subject to the discipline of the PDIP. So now Joko is not his own man. He cannot do whatever he wants. He has to constantly negotiate with the Politburo of the PDIP and people like Megawati. Yeah, you may have concern with Megawati. What I like is that at least Jokowi is not just a popularity-based president, he's also disciplined by a party. So my point is that through certain legal modification, you can force Filipino presidential candidates to have a certain decency to be beholden to certain political parties. And for me, more than ideological vigor and rigor, what's important is that the political parties are the one who will provide you money and funds. And if you do not have political parties to provide you money and funds, you'll have to rely on oligarchs or even foreign powers, which was my concern with these elections, right? So for me, that's why we need to get the political party right, but it's a chicken or egg question. My opinion is, let's start small, like what they do in Indonesia. Put a cap on whether if you want to be a presidential candidate, you have to belong to a political party already, which has at least 1/3 of or 1/4 of the Congress.
But I can tell you this, in a week's time, you'll have more PDP Laban congressmen.
You have to put also
In
time
history.
limit. Exactly. Another thing in Indonesia is that they have a time limit. You cannot switch your party overnight. I think there's like a moratorium of 2 to 3 years before doing that. So that's the other thing. You have to legally introduce discipline, and then over time, that could create discipline. But for me, fundamentally, to get the political party question right is, look at America, the country where we got our democracy. If you were in America in the 19th century, the America that conquered us, their political parties were even more a joke than the one we had. If you watch movies like Gangs of New York or Boardwalk Empire, the office of mayor was up for bidding. I mean, literally up for bidding. How did they fix it? They fixed it through introducing legal reforms under the Pendleton Act in 1882. They fixed it because the middle class was empowered and name and shame politicians into having more party discipline. So I think we need also the middle class and the civil society to be involved in pushing for the political party reform, not only on the legal side.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what's unique about the Philippine political landscape is the prevalence of political dynasties in practically all regions of the
And
of
you're
our
not
country.
referring just to the Villafuertes of Camarines Sur, right?
Among others, yeah. But as far as the party list system is concerned, we can see how the political dynasties have infiltrated the system, making a mockery of the party list law. And actually, right from the very start, as mentioned by the other panelists, the party list law already exposes the lack of representation in the so-called House of Representatives. If the HOR was really functioning well, there would be no need for party list representation in the first place. And it didn't help any that the Supreme Court in 2009 redefined marginalization as, encompassing everything. So there came a time when even the real estate developers tried to come up with its own party list, claiming that they were marginalized for the simple reason. Do you know why they claim to be marginalized? They said that they were in the minority, even if they are the 1% that controls the entire economy. So that's the prostitution, for lack of a better term. I'm supposed to be in Malate, so I shouldn't be talking about prostitution of concepts.
Easy.
Nevertheless, that's... Okay, perversion. Okay, that's a good term, Professor. So that kind of prostitution of the party list system has happened. Now, according to our study, if you would allow me to enumerate some party lists, Abono, for example, is controlled by the Ortegas of La Union. In Quezon City, which is not so far from here, you have the SB party list, and you know what SB stands for, right? It's controlled by the Belmontes.
Serbisyong bayan.
Okay, I'm sorry, Serbisyong Bayan. But that's still Belmonte. In Iloilo, there's also a party list controlled by the Tupas. Okay? So in other words, it's possible for a political dynasty to hold seats in the House of Representatives, and then in the party list, they would gain more seats also. So again, it's part of their political expediency. So that's it. Thank you.
So that's what you call anak ng tupas.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. All right. Maliwanag yun. From the police, you have some facts and figures there. Can you please tell us whatever happened to the private armed groups, the people who were all arrested for violating the gun ban? Whatever happened to them?
Of course, on the part of the PNP, those who were arrested in the previously for violations of the law, they will be filed. Charges would be filed against them, and then these are continuing process. Recently, the chief PIO, the General Mayor, has stated that all the firearms that was confiscated because of this gun ban would be inspected. They would be examined in the crime laboratory, and then all those who are arrested will be charged, and this process continues on until the conclusion of the gun ban.
And since it's an election law, those found guilty will have to, spend vacation in jail?
Yes, definitely.
Is it more than 6 years and 1 day?
I believe so.
Okay.
Depends on the violation.
Yeah, okay. They say what a difference a day makes, 24 little hours. For someone to get a sentence below 6 years, you can go for parole. For 6 years and 1 day, you get inside, right?
But what is important for the PNP, sir, is that we have arrested around 4,237 persons, and then the number of firearms that we confiscated is around 3,495. So imagine we took this away from the society, and then maybe this is like not giving these criminals a chance to disrupt the electoral process and other things. Siguro we also have a way of stopping them to do bad things.
Yeah.
Stop criminality.
So
that is basically that's a good.
You have how many of those Filipinos who were arrested?
We have 4,237 arrested from different sectors. We have
Okay.
civilians. We have, of course, in fact, we have from our own. We have 33 PNP personnel who were arrested for.
I'm just as surprised as anybody else. The government was never remiss in saying there's a Comelec gun ban, and yet you get to arrest them. So these guys must be stupid, no?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sorry, but you cannot sue them for stupidity, right?
Maybe.
So you cannot. So it's for the violation of the gun ban.
Or maybe, sir, they're just too hard-headed.
Okay. That's another way of looking at it, sir. Questions from the floor? Yes, please.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Bayani. I am a concerned citizen. I'd like to address my question to the police, sir. Na-alarm ho kasi talaga ako dun sa massive vote buying na it almost destroyed the process, the democratic process. It's the triumph of evil among the system. May kaibigan po akong kumandidatong mayor sa Surigao, sa Leyte, even in Pasay. It's so massive. The night before election, mga chairman po, barangay chairman, ang kinausap may 25,000. Pag naipanalo mo yung tatlo, Rojas, Robredo, and the mayor. Ganun po ang usapan. Sabi nyo kanina, kung hindi ko alam kung yung failure of intelligence to on part of the police, meron na ho ba kayo ng mga nahuli?
Vote buying.
Yeah.
Okay.
First, ganito po yan. First, we have to consider that the PNP personnel are already deployed in the precincts. They are performing duties at the precincts to secure the precinct areas. In fact, we are even helped by the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Now, regarding the vote buying, yun nga, as I have said before, no one would claim that a person, kung yung binilihan ng boto, walang magsasabi na siya ay binila ng boto. And no one would complain for vote buying. That is one thing. Kasi wala talagang individual na magsasabi na bumili sa akin ng boto tong kandidato na to. Walang magsasabi ng ganon. And of course, on the part of the PNP, napakahirap yan because vote buying will definitely not be done in public. Diba? Walang magbo-vote buying na kandidato that would risk his name. And of course, another, yung bibila ng boto, he would not risk being in prison for vote buying. Now, ang ginagawa po namin dyan sa PNP, of course, you said we have intelligence personnel. We identified the places where this vote buying would likely to happen, and then we post policemen there. Yun nga sinatawag namin in our terms, bulabog. Binubulabog yung lugar para yung may mga reports ng vote buying, mag-alisan. So that is one thing that we do. Yun nga, although we cannot say this to the public because walang arrest. What do we have to say? Hindi natin pwede sabihin na, di ba? We usually report arrest, significant accomplishments. But this kind of operations, yung tinatawag namin na bulabog, we do not usually report this. Kasi baga there is no sense na sasabihin mo, we do this. Ang tatanong sa atin ng media is, what is the effect, di ba?
Talaga ho pala, ipapasa Diyos na lang natin yung ginagawa ng kapulisan.
Hindi naman po, yun nga po, katulad nga na nasabi ko po, yun po yung ginagawa ng PNP. There were reports of vote buying in Metro Manila, and what we do is usually we post our personnel there para ma-diffuse yung tao doon, nag-aalisan sila. Yun ang ginagawa namin. Of course, and then yung intelligence personnel then nag-i-spot sila. And once na nagpunta doon yung tao natin, nakahuli sila, yun, papailan natin ang charge. But unfortunately, so far, hanggang ngayon, wala pa kami nang re-receive na report about vote buying.
Okay.
Last question lang, pwede naman ho sa lahat. Kasi last January 16, meron hong prophecy
Teka muna, diba? Delikado yan.
among Christian pastors in the US by Sidney Jacobs about this election. Kasi siya rin yung naganawa ng prophecy nung sa Yolanda. That was many years ago. I'd like to hear your comment with regards to this prophecy, if you know about this, Cindy Jacobs.
Sorry, I don't believe in prophecies. Sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't believe in prophecies because as an academic, we would rather look at the scientific basis of things. Kahit si Nostradamus, binasa ko rin yun nung bata ako pero hindi rin ako naniwala. Pasensya na po. Yeah, because... Yeah, Professor?
No, please, no.
Yun ang pinakamahirap na tanong so far, ha? Okay. Wala makakasagot. Okay. Ang tanong ko ganito, no? Katulad po niyan, sa Pasay, as early as Friday night, may mga messages na ang message, ingat po kayo sa Pasay, bumabaha. Teka muna, anong baha? Wala namang ulan dahil may El Nino. Bumabaha na po ng pera. At ang rate 1,000 pataas. Pero may nabalita rin ako in some instances sa Mindanao, nung mga nakalipas na mga eleksyon, nagche-checkpoint yung mga pulis. At ang nache-checkpoint may dalang pera. Nakukuha yung pera pambili ng boto. Sa halip na magreklamo yung nakuna ng pera, nanahimik na lang. Happy naman daw yung pulis dahil nasa kanila yung pera. Okay na raw yun eh. Pero all these are anecdotal. And nobody will pass laws, no? Na maka-apekto dito. Siguro kung meron man magpapanukala, hindi rin naman papasa. Like yung IRR ng anti-dynasty. No? We have room for one last question from Tracy Cabrera.
Good morning po. Isa lang remark from our guests. Ano ho ba ang problema natin? Is it because the electorate has not matured? Or it's because we don't simply have a choice because of the COMELEC?
I think the problem is systemic more than anything else. It's systemic in the sense that the current socio-political system deprives people of, the right choices in terms of the change that they want to bring about. Sometimes we lack the appreciation of the nature of elections. Elections are just about changing leadership, but we don't change the system itself, because changing the system would require something extrajudicial, something extra legal. So it's the dialectic of the reform and revolution that would define the change that we want here. So when a particular presidential candidate says that change is coming, I think he should better qualify it as just simply a change of leadership. Because if you look at the 8-point program, which is a draft still, so it's still open to revisions, it's still not a substantial departure from the neoliberal policies of the Aquino government and even the predecessors of the current administration. So regardless of what we think of neoliberalism, you may be for or against globalization, but what we can conclude based on the 8-point program, which is still a draft, is Duterte or his his leaders would want a continuity of economic policy. So what we're saying here is it's just simply a change of leadership. So what we need here is, substantial social change, where social inequity, where social inequality would be practically non-existent, and we can only achieve that if we try to look deeper into the roots of the problem. So that's why, regardless of what we think of the insurgency, there are certain programs that are being proposed by various revolutionary groups. So we're not just talking about the National Democratic Front, we're also talking about other groups here. So it's something worth reviewing, especially for a president that claims to be the first leftist president of the country. So if he really wants to live up to that kind of a label, then by all means, try to take on bold measures to ensure that indeed change is coming.
Butch?
I would like to describe this last election as something like a constitutional revolution. This phenomenon happened about 30 years ago with the Corazon Aquino ascendancy. In case of Corazon Aquino's ascendancy, the reason it went into a revolutionary condition was because whoever was in power then was not ready to relinquish power and had actually done certain things where, at least as perceived by the popular supporters of Corazon Aquino, to be something which is cheating. In this particular case, we had this phenomenon wherein there was massive support for Duterte. But whatever the administration was trying to do, and if ever it was trying to do it, was not enough to be able to change the outcome of this. That's why this phenomenon. But as I associated the remarks of the professor, that the support that Duterte had gotten was on the promise of system change. A change of the system, and not just one part of it, but the whole system. And since he identified the 8-point economic program that came out 1 or 2 days only after the election, among the first policy statements that had come out, which was basically a copy of what Noynoy Aquino's administration was pushing, created a reaction, immediate reaction, with the mass, certain sectors of the supporters of Duterte, who were expecting precisely a change in the economic policy, because that was what was causing the so-called poverty and difficulties.
Okay. So what you're saying is the difference is the same.
That's sad, because if the difference is the same, then it feels like Duterte was being used like a Trojan horse, wherein certain elements of the previous administration are going to be entrenched into again, the economic policy. Maybe different faces, different names, but the same policy. No?
Same mold.
Same mold.
Okay. Richard.
Yeah, first of all, I think we have to be fair to Digong. The market was very jittery. There could have been a panic in stock markets. There could have been a massive capital flight. So what Carlos Dominguez was trying to do there is to reassure them that don't worry, there will be some decent element of continuity. And I think as a political analyst, I think that was a good thing to do. Because how could you bring about prosperity where all the capital is flying away, right? But there were certain provisions that I think were different. For instance, the emphasis on tourism in rural areas, the emphasis on, for instance, crime, fighting crime. That's the second paragraph. I think the second proposal, it was there. Of course, it remains to be seen how he really wants to fight and suppress crime within 6 months. So as much as I want real change, I mean, my point is I hope we don't go the Mao Zedong kind of change, right? And I believe in what I call revolution. Systemic reforms that over time actually create that create almost a revolutionary change. And I think that's what we need in the Philippines. Now, I answered that question very shortly in a post I wrote for, I think, Huffington Post. The title is simple, Why the Philippines Failed. And it's based on an empirical understanding of how other East Asian countries transformed from backward countries into one of the most democratic and developed countries, like Taiwan, South Korea, Japan. And what was common among all of these countries, one thing, they had what you call developmental states. States that became agent of change. They did not rely on strong men per se, but on strong state institutions. That's a problem we had. We put strong men in power like Marcos, but they never strengthened state institutions. That is why even during Marcos' period, corruption was tremendous, through the roof. Poverty was not reduced and economic policies were not properly implemented. So what I hope Digong will do is not to create a strong man, but to create rule of law with strong institutions. And that means you have to invest in police force, you have to invest in the armed forces, you have to invest in your bureaucracy and tax collection, among others. And I think, in fairness, I think number 4, emphasize, will make the BIR tax collection more efficient. I hope we will do that, right?
Okay.
So I'll just keep it there. And I always say, be careful what you wish for.
All right. Archbishop, the late Jaime Cardinal Sin was quoted as saying that Alibaba may have fled, but the 40 thieves remained and multiplied. This was in 1986, 87, or 88. What's your take? Do you think that Alibaba may have fled, but the 40 thieves multiplied and transformed themselves into somebody else?
I'll be quite honest here.
Oh, you've always been.
I think the former Cardinal Sin, and this is kidding aside, had some prophetic constitutional mind. And I know what I'm talking about because I was his assistant
That's why I ask you.
for several years. And this fellow, supposed to be from a distant place there, somewhere,
In Iloilo, no?
never mind,
Who was instrumental in the baptism of one?
never mind. But yet, he came here all of a sudden, and we did not expect him. And yet, his performance was terrific. I can say for a fact that his prophetic constitution is more than proven. It's more than proven. And this is a reality which I do not think is hard to understand.
Okay. Short question for everyone. What do you expect of Mr. Duterte? What do you expect of him? Let's say on foreign policy and the like, yes?
With the coming of the presumptive president,
In the first place, is the term presumptive acceptable? Coming from the academe.
I am not an academic. You are the academic.
So why is it that people in the media use presumptive? It's as if, in Tagalog, as what Newshen said, atat na atat, no?
With the incoming presumptive President. Now I can announce it quite publicly and openly that if there is a Buhay party list, there'll be a Patay party list. and I think we'll get a lot of votes here. And I might not lead it, but I will inspire it.
Okay.
And I think that is fair. There is a Buhay, there is a Patay. What's
It's
new?
in Ecclesiastes.
What
There's a time for everything. Right?
Amen.
Okay. Hallelujah. Yes, please. What do we expect of the man? Foreign policy,
Yeah, just a quick
relations with
yeah,
the press?
Just a quick interjection regarding the term presumptive and president-elect. Technically, you become a president-elect upon formal proclamation from Congress, and you know that the proclamation will happen toward the end of May. So you become president-elect only by that time, and you become president upon taking your oath of office. So what do we call the presumptive president now? Presumptive is grammatically correct, but sometimes we are allergic to it in the academe because there's an association of it being presumptuous or inaakala, because presumptive means inaakalang presidente, right? So the more neutral term would be leading presidential candidate because he's leading anyway, right? At least in the unofficial quick count. Remember that this is unofficial still, and it's just being done just to ensure transparency allegedly in the election. But of course, speed doesn't mean accurate, okay? But we'll leave that aside from now. Now, what do we expect from the Duterte presidency? Of course, we hope that he will keep to his promise, that he will bring about progressive change, and we hope that the mistakes of the past will not be repeated. So what does this mean? We hope that there will be a massive overhaul of the 8-point program. There's no time to discuss why we should go against neoliberalism and why we should go against the tide of globalization. But suffice it to say that the mass movement will still be there and will still continue the advocacy. So Duterte can be expected to have that kind of critical appraisal, okay? No matter what he does. And most especially, if he ends up violating human rights, then he knows that the enemies will grow by the numbers. So he has to be very, very careful with that.
Okay. From the Philippine National Police, I don't know whether you have the data. I don't know whether you have the data, but was there a reduction in crimes, heinous crimes, when death penalty was being implemented? Because Mr. Duterte was quoted as saying he'll go for the reimposition of the death penalty, which the good Archbishop talked about as party list, no? Patay party list.
Well, on part of the PNP sa amin, sir, is yung question of death penalty. Of course, it's not on the PNP. We just follow the law. We just obey the orders of our commander. But what we are being happy about right now on Mr. Duterte being elected is that, one, I believe yung pag-handle niya ng police officer sa Davao, we hear good things about it. And then yung promise niya, of course, lahat siguro ng tao pag nalaman mo na ang sweldo mo ay tataas, siguro yung kung ano man yung lungkot mo biglang mapapangiti ka pag naisip mo yon. So that is one thing. Maybe ang importante dito is that yung police officers hindi na mag-iisip ng iba pang bagay to have more income. Maybe it would be a help for us to concentrate more on our job as police officers. So yun nga, makakapag-focus kami on our duty as police officers. Siguro yung mga ibang policeman na dahil kulang yung kanilang kinikita, gumagawa sila ng ibang paraan. Of course, legal lang ang ating tinatanggap na paraan, nagbi-business sila. But now, that yun nga, we have a promise from our incoming president, or sabi nga ni Sir, leading presidential candidate, na pag umupo na siya, talagang tutugunan niya yung pangangailangan ng ating mga kapulisan, makakapag-concentrate kami sa aming job as police officers. And in terms of anti-criminality, yun, we read about Davao. Nakita natin yun, merong mga CCTVs and this yun nga yung pag-handle ng pulis, suporta sa ating kapulisan sa Davao. Maybe talagang magiging masaya kami sa Philippine National Police kung ito yung ma-implement nationwide.
Dito nga yung railing sa tulay, nananakaw, CCTV pa kaya? Di ba? Yeah, that's one. Number two, how will the campaign by Mr. Duterte against wetting affect the police? Because I would like to believe, as the good Archbishop believes, some people in the police are happy with wetting.
yung pong of course, the PNP is an organization, anything illegal, hindi namin tinatanggap yan. Now, kung meron man sa amin na nai-involve sa ganyang mga gawain, we do not tolerate it. Kung ano man ang mangyari sa kanila, problema nila yon. Bahala sila. Kung gusto nilang gawin pa rin yon, bahala sila. What is important is that the incoming administration is serious about criminality. So that is a big thing for us. Isipin natin na of course there are violators, there are bad eggs in the organization of the PNP, but siguro mas marami pa rin yung nagtatrabaho, gumagawa ng tama at gusto na maging maayos yung bayan natin. So yun na lang siguro ang panghahawakan natin. And then with the help of the incoming president na talagang very supportive in terms of peace and order, malaking bagay po para sa amin.
Thank you. Butch?
Well, Mr. Duterte strikes me as somebody who has a high sense of common sense. And much of his statements really comes from his almost raw understanding of certain developments. Having said that, I think his supposed economic policy goes contrary to that very nature of common sense of President-elect Duterte. And if this continues, the social unrest will develop very, very fast. And whatever things that he had promised with regard to criminality may not be met, precisely because a continuous and expansion of poverty. The sad thing about the present situation now is there are certain sectors that are relegating him merely to become the country's policeman. He is not just a policeman, he is the president of the whole country, in which case he has to address economic issues, foreign affairs issues, and peace and order issues, because they are all interrelated. Having said that, I would like to say that I am hoping for the best, but we must prepare for the worst.
Richard?
Gusto ko lang i-point out yung isa kasing napanood ko na sa TV, yung nahuli na drug pusher, something like that. So, di ba? Yung palang nalaman, yung statement niya na nagsabi niya na patawarin niyo ako, Mr. Duterte, di ba? So, yung palang nakikita niyo na how afraid yung mga criminals to the incoming president. So, for us, malaking bagay yun, maganda yun. Kasi, imagine, hindi pa nga umuupo yung incoming president natin. Yung nahuling drug leader, pusher, or whoever he is, nagbabanggit na siya, napatawarin siya. Ibig sabihin, meron ng takot.
Okay. Takot party list.
Malaking bagay yun. So,
Okay.
sa amin, sa PNP, mas siguro mapapadala yung trabaho namin dahil yung nag-iisip pa lang gumawa ng masama because of the image of our incoming president, hindi niya nagagawin, hindi niya itutuloy.
Bakit kasi yung sinapok ni Herbert Bautista sa Quezon City, parang ayaw paniwalaan ng tao? May tanong pa? May pahabol. Gentlemen, please.
Sorry po. I think it was last night sinabi ni leading presidential candidate Duterte na he will push for the revival of death penalty and shoot to kill order. So for everyone po in the panel, PNP, will you follow that? Sa ating pong mga political analysts, anong implication nun? And of course kay Archbishop Cruz, how do you feel about that po? And ano po ang gagawin ng simbahan?
Let's start with the good Archbishop.
The good Lord only gave 10 commandments. And one of those is, thou shalt not kill. Now, one thing is self-defense, and therefore to defend yourself, you have to kill. Another thing is to kill somebody who's precisely already committed to prison, no matter how long it is, how long is the imprisonment. So you'll understand that the church, and this I can predict very well, will not welcome the death sentence. On my part, ang gusto ko lamang sana, pwede ba yung bilibid ay maging talagang preso, hindi maging hotel? Pwede ba yung bilibid wala na sanang mga jacuzzi, wala nang mga aircon, wala nang mga droga, wala nang mga baril? Please naman. So that imprisonment will mean more than just what we have it now. Those who are imprisoned are enjoying life. In short, therefore, let us make a reality of what we call punishment due to the demand of justice. Huwag nating paglaruan ang buhay ng tao, ang asikusahin natin yung ating mga estruktura, lalo-lalo na sa pagpapalaganap ng katarungan. Kung pwede lang. And may I add, precisely one of the headaches that the country now has is the immobility practically of the justice system. It does not move. And I was told that justice delayed is justice denied. I say no. Justice delayed is injustice. Just imagine, up to now, the 58 persons who were killed, massacred in Maguindanao, up to now, not one of the suspect has been convicted. Yes, they are suspect. Pero 6 na taon na, 58 yung pinatay. No. Maguindanao to. Mamasapa is 44. Ikaw naman, Yang, nasaan ba ako? Nakalimutan ko na ito. So, Maguindanao. Talagang wala. Pero isama mo na rin mga masapano. Hanggang ngayon, ilang taon na, wala pa rin. So, pwede ba? Bilisan ng konti ang let us do something about our justice system so that it moves. Isa pa, bakit lamang yung nagkamali na hindi ka partido ang napupunta sa preso? Bakit yung mga guilty ng graft and corruption na kapartido ko ay wala? Sinabi mo pa, lalo sumama ang loob ko. So, these are very, very shallow thoughts that I have about this matter.
Thank you. Butch?
What comes to mind is Artikulo 1 of General Luna. It used to be that treason was punishable by death. And since we had treason being the highest type of crime that any one person, especially an official of the country, can commit, because it goes against national interest. In other words, being a traitor to your country is considered such a heinous crime that it must be punishable by death, especially if it is proven. Now, if the government considers certain types of crime to be against national interest, which means not just national interest in terms of territory or anything like that, but killing populations, purposely killing populations, doing things to destroy a society. I think we should reconsider our position with regard to this. If we can, if life imprisonment might not be enough because they might be free to whatever, then we should reconsider this and make the penalty strong enough. And this kind of crime, which is contrary to national interest, you must remember, will most probably not include the poorer sector of our society, but the higher sector of our society. Many people complain that if you have death penalty, only the poor are killed, are executed, because the rich are able to get lawyers and so on and so forth to defend them. Maybe that is true. But when it comes to treason, most probably you will not see a poor man committing that kind of a crime.
Yeah, because no poor man has that power to betray the country, right? Professor Heydarian and Professor Arao, the Philippines is signatory to an international convention against the death penalty. What will that make of the Philippines under President Duterte?
Try to be as diplomatic as possible.
Yes, please.
Well, okay. I mean, the first thing is this, nakikita ko yung punto na dapat matakot ang criminals, of course, right? But my point is that we don't need only common sense, but what Antonio Gramsci called good sense. And good sense means naintindihan mo yung dynamics behind crime. And we know that crime is not because people lack fear. A lot of times, crime happens because the root cause is poverty. The root cause is an environment that pushes so many people to desperation that they're even willing to risk their lives for death penalty to do that. So I think there's no way we can deal with the issue of crime unless we deal with the root cause, which is poverty. That's why we bring us back to what kind of alternative economic model we can create that brings about inclusive development. Otherwise, the other problem I have is this. In Davao, you're the mayor, you can micromanage everything. You're the president, you have to delegate. And when you have you give a carte blanche for shoot to kill or whatever, there could be a lot of room for error. And for me, when it comes to life, as a good Christian, as a monotheist, right? When it comes to life, life is sacred and there should be no room for excuse. And I don't believe in giving carte blanche to that. What we should do is to strengthen enforcement of existing rules, apprehension, and once they're inside jail, we make sure that we have a real Alcatraz, right? We don't have a Bilibid mall, right? We have to build more Alcatraz, put them so much away that there's no way for them to do all of their trading while inside. So my point is, if you go around the world, there are a lot of countries like Europe where you don't have death penalty. Look at the rates of crime there and compare it to countries that have death penalty in developing countries, right? And you could see that even countries that have low poverty, even if they don't have death penalty, crime is low. And the countries that even they have death penalty but high poverty, crime rates are still high. So correlation-wise, I don't see a strong correlation between this, let's just give a carte blanche and everything will be solved. What I see is that you have to deal with the root cause, and that's poverty. And I completely agree with the point. If fighting crimes mean fighting crime from the lumpen proletariat and leaving the bourgeoisie class to do whatever they want, I don't see that as fighting crime. I see that as selective justice. If we really want justice and to fight crime, you have to fight crimes at the highest levels. And let's begin that by making sure that people who committed corruption in the past few years, they'll go to jail for what they deserve.
Yeah, in the first place, some people say, why do you need the death penalty for when you have a death squad? Yes,
Yeah,
Professor.
that's a good point. In a situation where we have a flawed criminal justice system, so the reimposition of the death penalty brings a lot of worries for the reasons articulated already a while ago. Because sometimes we have to look at the context. Will we punish, for example, with death, a mother who stole infant milk from a grocery store? So these things would have to be taken into consideration because there are socioeconomic factors that would bring about such crimes. And in a situation where shoot to kill becomes something like, SOP for the police or any other death squads out there. So it could be quite dangerous. So the problem in Davao with the preponderance of the death squad is that it has given rise to anti-communist groups like the Alsamasa and the Tadtad. Some of you may be too young to remember it, but in the mid-1980s, that was the case. So these are a bunch of religious fanatics, anti-communist in character, and would, behead people for the simple reason that they have moles on their napes. I'm not kidding. One indicator that you're a communist is that you have a mole in your nape. Okay, so that was their belief. Okay, and these are God-fearing people. Okay, I'm sorry for using God in a not good manner, but in a generic manner. But they believe in God. They pray before execution, but they kill still. So that's one worry, because for those who give high praises to Duterte because of the low crime rate, allegedly low crime rate in Davao, and that it's safe to walk at night there, it comes with a price sometimes. It's out of fear of being killed, and it's not because of the respect for the law. It's more out of, the subsequent punishment that would come with it because of, having those vigilante groups, etc., etc. And we have to remember, there are cases where those who get executed were because of mistaken identity. We have anecdotal evidence of one mother who lost 3 children to the Davao Death Squad. So you can say that, it's just one. What about the more than 1,000 drug addicts out there? Yeah, maybe they are drug pushers, they are drug addicts, but the suppliers, have they been prosecuted? So again, there rises that question. So there is reason to worry about it. I'm not saying that it's going to happen on a wide scale in the Philippines, okay? We're not prophetic in any way, but we should hope that it doesn't happen.
From the Philippine National Police.
I just would like to make it clear, sir, no? Yung word na term na shoot to kill, there is no such thing as shoot to kill in the police. Because we only act according to law. Diba? There is no such thing as shoot to kill in the PNP. Kasi we only act in self-defense. We use force for self-defense. Yun ang nasa batas natin at yun ang gagawin namin at yun ang legal. So hindi kami pwedeng sabihin na shoot to kill. Kasi when you use the term shoot to kill, your intention is to kill. Diba? When you say shoot to kill. But we only use force para i-depensa ang stranger. What is according to law? To defend ourselves in the performance of our duty. So siguro nagkakaroon lang tayo ng misinterpretation on the term shoot to kill. Siguro yun nga, yung iba, itong interpretation natin sa ganitong bagay. Pero basically, under our laws, kung susundin po natin ang batas, wala pong there is no such thing as shoot to kill. Ang PNP po is a professional organization. Kung ano po yung nasa batas, kung ano po yung nasa regulasyon, yun lang po ang gagawin namin. So hindi po namin gagawin kung ano man yung labas sa batas. And we must remember na I believe nagkaroon po ng statement ng ating incoming president na he will do things within the bounds of law. Meron siyang statement na gano'n na kung ano man ang gagawin niya, it is within the bounds of law. Now, on how he would do it, hindi pa namin alam. We will wait on his policies, and the PNP as an organization would be ready on these policies kung ano man ibibigay niya. But we have to stress that all we will do is within the bounds of law.
Thank you for the assurance. There must have been some misunderstanding in the term shoot to kill. Because had it been said by somebody else, I know of a good place where it is famous, behind the statue of Lapu-Lapu in Mactan Island, where shoot to kill is very good, no? But anyway, we'd like to end our special edition this morning. I'm reminded of somebody who was accused of stealing something for the child. The reason I didn't watch Les Miserables was I already felt miserable. But anyway, I'd like to thank our guests who took time out to be with us. Next Monday, we will talk more seriously about what to expect from the Duterte administration in terms of agriculture, rice production, foreign policy, and the like. Okay? I'd like to thank Dr. Danilo Arao, who came over from UP, Archbishop Oscar Cruz, Professor Richard Heydarian, who came all the way from Makati, Mr. Antonio Butch Valdez, and Chief Inspector Jonathan Del Rosario. Maraming salamat po.